I am Kevin Conroy. I'm doing the voice of Batman in Arkham City.
My name is Nick Arundel. I'm the audio director at Rocksteady Studios in London.
In the TV shows or the games, you're interacting with the other actors in a booth together. They always like to have the cast together. There's a lot of give and take, there's a lot of play. In the games, depending on how the game's played, there are literally hundreds of variables for the directions it can go in, for the attitude of the lines. So you're doing line after line, and you're alone in a booth because it all has to be clean. Line after line after line after line after line after line. Okay, try those with a little more irony. Line after line after line after line. Okay, now can you do a little more humor? Okay, line after line after line. Now angry with irony. Now a little bit of sarcasm. You know, I mean, you're literally doing all these different variations on thousands of different lines in a vacuum. Because you don't know how the game's going to be played. So it's all put together in post-production. It's a real challenge to keep the character authentic, to be true to Batman, when you don't have anyone to bounce off of. And not only are you trying to keep the character authentic, but you want to keep the performance alive. Because you can slip into a coma alone in a booth, just line after line after line after line after line, you know, for hour after hour after hour, 8-hour days. I mean, it's really a little mind-bending.
Well, I guess the biggest difference is, think about recording. If you've got to record certainly all the ambient sound, all the kind of textures that make a city sound like a city. Recording indoors is reasonably straightforward. It's a controlled environment. You know, you can tell people to be quiet. You can set up microphones and they won't get blown away. Outside, it's a totally different story. And that was a huge challenge for us, to make sure that we had this deserted city feel, and where we could possibly record that, because, you know, if we went out on the streets in New York, it's far too busy. It's not a walled off prison inside a block. It's a real active city, so we had to really be careful about how we walk the line between this deserted feel and really hit home with some kind of key, iconic city sounds.
The stakes are greater, and the character, because he's not confined in Arkham, it's a much more expansive and sort of liberating adventure. He flies all through the city. It's visually beautiful, and so I found that the performance got a little more expansive, a little bigger.
I think everything we do is kind of, if you take the music, all the instruments we use tend to use the kind of lower registers of their range. We don't really have lots of high sound, high sound, and it's the same with the sound design. We don't have lots of bells or wind chimes. You know, we want dark, kind of rumbly textures. We want to hear like a distant train rumble. We don't want to hear the kind of, the sound of the wheels hitting the tracks and that kind of shing shing. We want to hear the yeah, so that's how we approach it. We try and do the darkest thing we can possibly do.
Mark is part of the heart and soul of the Batman ethos. That being said, there are dozens of possible adversaries, from Two-Face to Catwoman to Penguin to, Mr. Freeze. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, all those different villains through the years. And Two-Face is a really interesting villain. I like Two-Face villain, and Catwoman's interesting. Poison Ivy. I mean, there have been so many. Joker is kind of an alter ego for Batman. There's a really interesting relationship between those two. So I would hate that if he weren't to come back. I would hate that. I never believe when people say that kind of stuff. I don't ever believe it's going to happen.